At the beginning of World War II, a German military government of occupation was installed in Belgium, which allowed the administration to function and was fully separated from the civil posts held by Belgians. The highest ministerial officials, the secretaries general, took over the de facto running of the country in the absence of the king, who was in captivity, and the government which had fled to London. The German general von Falkenhausen was appointed as the Militärbefehlshaber, a regional governor of occupied territories for Belgium and northern France, while Raeder served under him as Militärverwaltungschef. Although it seemed as if civil autonomy had been maintained, this hid a distinct German interference in the choice of personnel at the various levels of authority. This mechanism lay at the foundation of the so-called Commissariat Général à la Restauration du Pays, which I will further on call the CGRP, which was established in June 1914. Appointed as Commissioner General was Charles Verwilgen, who before the occupation was Secretary General of the Ministry of Labour and Social Security. Three major departments were established. Department A for employment, Department B for reconstruction, and Department C for war damage. The head of the Department for Reconstruction was Raphael Verwilgen, the younger brother of the Commissioner General and one of the founding fathers of town and country planning in Belgium. Verwilgen was probably the most suitable person to take up this key position. A trained engineer architect, during the First World War, he was involved in the creation and preparation of the first Belgian statutory order on urban planning of 1915. After the war, after the First World War, from 1919 to 23, he was Secretary General of the Department of Devastated Regions. However, he left this post due to the disillusionment he felt about his inability to gain acceptance for any modernist ideas in the administrative circles of that time. Together with his architect friends Richard Acke, Jean Eggerix, Antoine Pomp, and Ferdinand Baudson, he went ahead with several garden city experiments on a limited scale, after which, at the end of the 20s, he accepted a mission for the spatial planning of Uvira and Bukavu in the Belgian Congo. Following van der Swaalmans, who was a landscape architect, van der Swaalmans' death in 1929, he took over van der Swaalmans' professorship at the Institut Supérieur des Arts Décoratifs, also known as La Cambre. Raphael Verwilgen's Department of Reconstruction comprised 4 sections: planning, urban development, architecture, and monument care. He himself was head of the urban planning section. The university professor Stan Leurs was appointed as the head of the monument care section. His team included another university professor, Raymond Lemaire, and the architects Max Winders, Hintjens, Joseph Vierin, and Valentin Vaarwijk, all modern architects. In charge of the architecture department was Henri van de Velde, an architect, artist, and one of the most prominent sources of inspiration for the international modernist movement. Van de Velde was a former director of the Weimar Kunstgewerbeschule and had also participated in the Werkbund. Just as Raphael Verwilgen also worked for the Ministry of Public Works Special Department of Urban Development before the war, Van de Velde was affiliated as an advisor to the same ministries, Office de Redressement Économique, Office for Economic Recovery, which I will call further on the OREC. And he was also advisor at the National Railway Company of Belgium. before the Second World War. And the fourth section, which covered planning, was led by Renate Zoetewij, also a professor at La Cambre and a former student of Verwilgen. From the end of 1940 to the beginning of 1944, the Department of Reconstruction published a periodical which appeared separately in both national languages under the for the French-speaking part under the title Reconstruction ou Reconstruction. The editor-in-chief was Pierre-Louis Flouquet, who before the war was in charge of the modernist periodical Bâtir. The reconstruction work carried out after the First World War was fiercely condemned due to its individualism and bad taste. The interwar period had been characterized by lamentations from the most prominent specialists such as Verwilgen, Louis van der Swaalmen, De Bruyne, Emile Vink, Camille Huysmans, and others. Together with Jacques Aron, a contemporary critic, we must then ask the question of which of the employees of the CGRP during the Second World War, quote, were naive enough to know that the work of the Commissariat Général also served the interests of the occupiers, end of quote. The emphasis can be fully placed on the great falsehoods which were consciously propagated by the periodical Reconstruction and which were located in the fact that the presence and possible influence of the German occupation were as good as completely concealed. In the secret communications from militair Verwaltungschef Reder to militair Befehlshaber von Falkenhausen, so in these secret reports, one can clearly discern that every effort was being made to prepare for the annexation of Belgium. According to these communications, Commissioner General Verwilgen had been instructed to carry out his work activities in close conjunction with the military government. According to these reports, the sub-departments of the CGRP were under the leadership of young German-speaking and pro-German ministerial officials. The planned organization, in addition to the personality of the pro-German Professor Stan Leurs, guaranteed the reconstruction and restoration of the destroyed monuments, this reconstruction would take place in harmony and unison with the German military government. The secret German reports mention that the reconstruction had been entrusted to, I quote, a group of trusted agents, namely, as we know, Verwilgen, Van de Velde, and Leurs. According to the same reports, in November 1940, there was a belief within the German occupying government that the fate of the Belgian economy would be closely tied to that of the German economy. The underlying intentions of the German occupiers were also located at the cultural level. Cultural life in post-war Belgium had to be primarily influenced from Germany. This mainly applied to the Flemish territories, which, according to reports, a certain German tendency already existed and where German literature and film had the task of driving out French influences. The fact that the German military occupiers had made thorough preparations for the cultural annexation of Belgium is shown by its secret report from September 1940, which is called Architectural Culture in Belgium and the Measures for its Reorganization. It was based on the observation that as far as architectural culture in Belgium was concerned, the end of the 19th century was a period of decay, full of, I quote, architectural sins, which deteriorated fully after the First World War. Political discord had hindered the development of the healthy strength of the Flemish people. The report blamed this deterioration primarily on the lack of general construction plans. The results of this were specifically the excessive use of farmland and the unrestrained expansion of the cities. building regulations and programs had to keep the building of individual houses within the bounds of regionalism, while ensuring, in imitation of the German example, the provision of distinctive working class housing and farmhouses, and also combating the Belgian industry in kitsch objects. Henri de Man was one of the main political figures who paved the way for this Commissariat General, and I would just give a short extension on his person. Henri de Man, who deemed political affirmation more important than class war, and he was a socialist political figure, as you know, was undoubtedly one of the most prominent pre-war figures responsible for the shift to a more national and state-oriented socialism. In his labor plan of 1933, de Man advocated a managed state economy which was primarily focused on limiting unemployment and the reorganization of the national economy in which the middle class and country dwellers would also be involved. As Minister of Public Works and Unemployment in the Van Zeeland government, it was he who founded the OREC, Office de Redressement Économique, and the National Commission for Advice on Urbanization. One of the main objectives of the OREC was to establish the link between employment and economic development, and on the one hand, and urban planning on the other. For plan socialists such as de Man, the national plan was the absolute ultimate aim. In June 1940, following the German invasion, de Man called together the members of the Belgian Workers' Party, from whom he became the chairman. And I quote, "Be in the first row of those who fight against poverty and demoralization, and for a resumption of employment and a return to normal life. However, do not think that you must resist the occupier, accept his conquest, and try instead to draw the lessons from it in order to make a start with new social advancement." End of quote. For de Man, the collapse of a defective world signified liberation, not a disaster, for the working classes and for socialism. The German occupiers were above all concerned with achieving a revival of industry that would help the German economy. The Militaire Befehlshaber's report of November 1940 contained a section in which it was stated that on the basis of the new European order which was being conceived, relations between Belgium and Germany had to be pulled much closer together. As a result, the German military government set up a service under the leadership of Militärbefehlshaber Schurmann from Cologne, who, in the framework of the powers of the State Planning Department, was responsible for investigating the possibilities in this regard. The following subjects were addressed: the connection of Belgian and German canal networks, the expansion of the German motorway network to Belgium and northern France, the problem of rail transport, the new construction of cities and boroughs, and the particular planning of the coal and industrial region of the Kempen. The same report also considered connecting the Albert Canal, which had been dug before the war, connecting it to a new canal which would reach the Rhine from Maastricht, Aachen and Cologne, and thereby open up the coal basins and brown coal regions of Belgium, northern France and Germany. The motorway network, above all, required an east-west connection from the ports to the canal. The railways needed to be better interconnected and provide for quicker connections between, for example, Cologne and Antwerp. The industrial region of the Kempen, which was rapidly gaining in importance, had to be structured and the settlement policy and transport organized in such a way as to also allow German industrial establishments. Urban development was also viewed from the perspective of German interests. For example, Schuurman and Kriegsverwaltungsabteilungschef Delius of Antwerp had together drawn up a report on the planning of Greater Antwerp due to the importance of this world port to Germany. Planology, or planology, was launched by the CGRP as a magic new philosophy. The term planology, imported by Verwilgen from the Netherlands in 1938, bore all of the enthusiasm and idealism with which work was begun on the planning task within the CGRP. The main task of planology was to provide the structures within which urban development could subsequently evolve on a smaller scale. According to Verwilgen's former student from La Cambre, Uyttenhove, planology originated from human geography and evolved in a three-part domain of natural geography, demography, and economics. Only Germany had substantially reviewed Raumforschung and Raumordnung since the Third Reich, but Verwilgen pointed to the difference with Germany, since Belgian planology was based exclusively on geography, was culturally determined, and therefore did not encroach upon economic territory. However, the definitive halt in construction in August 1942 was symptomatic of the real problems which were beginning to appear. The circumstances of the war necessitated the German army's seizure of heavy construction equipment to build coastal defenses. Bridge building and road construction were gradually continued as a function of military needs, while measures were taken to ensure the army's water supply and on the coast and in the city of Brussels. In its approach to the problem of the great agglomerations, the CGRP aimed to continue pre-war work of Baron Holvoet. In 1941, Brussels, Ghent, Antwerp, Liège, and Charleroi were designated to be the subject of a systematic study. Bruges and La Louvière were added to this list in 1942. According to Arthur Bach, Deputy Commissioner for the Large Agglomerations, these agglomerations that I mentioned had to undergo a genuine reconstruction, which could not be dictated by the long decline of local authority policy that had mainly taken place in Wallonia. With the new decrees of 1941 and 1942, the government aimed to bear the costs of their development and implementation. From the end of 1942, a great effort was made to provide the local authorities with administrative assistance in drawing up the plans. Urban development bureaus were set up and under the auspices of the CGRP, and they were concerned with planology, whereas in the provinces, bureaus were established with a pivotal role between the Commissariat Général and the urban development bureaus in the boroughs, insofar as there were any. At the beginning of the occupation, competitions were organized for the reconstruction of several cities, such as Tournai, Nivelles, Wavre, Pervez, and Bouillon, in each of which 4 or 5 architects or groups of architects took part. However, the competition for Wavre was heavily criticized. According to one of the German military reports, the designs submitted ranged from, I quote, international big city architecture to, and I quote again, historicizing romanticism. Some filled the historical center full of, I quote, steel and concrete, as if it were a, I quote, small New York or part of a world exhibition. During the war, the functionalism of the Athens Charter was pushed into the background in favor of a more preservation-inclined in situ approach. With the use of propaganda tools, such as exhibitions, the well-known Renat Braam in collaboration with the CGRP, advocated the, I quote, the conscious reorganization of the frameworks of life. The family had a the family had a central symbolic function in Renat Brahms' new work. This concern for the local community can also be seen in his list of urban planning functions: residential life, traffic, employment, leisure, and community life. The fifth function was not included in the classic pre-war Siam quartet. Following a request from the German occupiers, the Department of Monument Care drew up a list of all the historical monuments damaged as a result of the war. It did not go any later than the cut-off year of 1830, unless, as the report noted, it concerned buildings which were of historical value in the development of architecture, for example, those of Van de Velde. As general advisor for architecture within the CGRP, the old Henri van de Velde initiated activities centered on a solid team of employees. Most of them were trained at the La Cambre school or had taught there. Van de Velde asked some of them, of his former students, or some of the students of La Cambre, to work on ensuring the success of their reconstruction, following the failures of the period of the First World War. Incidentally, during the war, lessons at La Cambre carried on. Bourgeois, Jean de Ligne, Raphael Verwilgen continued their professorship. Van de Velde saw in Belgium the homeland of the international modern architecture movement and hoped that links could again be established with this honorable development. The CGRP continued the architectural policy line of the OREC, but also substantially differed from it. Just as before the war, during the war, every building permit was strictly checked. The demands came mainly from public authorities. They were investigated by Van de Velde's team, after which potential counter-proposals were developed, which were then discussed with the people involved. From the architectural competitions, the German major Rosemann was always on the jury, although, according to his reports, his comments always remained discreet. The problem of the so-called new tendency, which had begun before the war, appeared to cause a great deal of discussion inside the CGRP. According to Van de Velde, there was no absolute rule regarding the aesthetics of the reconstruction. However, it is striking how modern architecture was completely absent of it. During the war, Van de Velde kept silent about this movement, although he had been at the beginning of pre-war modernist architectural styles, such as those of Max Brunfaut, Sta Jasinski, Jean van Latem, Jean Mouchen, and others. The reconstruction signaled a break with the design ideology that emanated from internationalist and functionalist ideas. Architecture critics such as Émile Envaux, who published 2 books during the war, Conditions de l'architecture and Aspects de l'urbanisme, saw in the reconstruction a struggle against machinism. After all, this philosophy opposed any form of soil-based regionalism. Like de Man, Envaux sought the truth in such works as Oswald Spengler's Le déclin de l'Occident. In reaction to the increasing severity of the occupying regime and his increasing disillusionment, at the age of 80, Henri van de Velde resigned from the CGRP in 1943. His resignation also came after he had discovered suspicious relations between members of the CGRP and the occupiers. Following the halt of building in 1942, the working activities of the CGRP diminished. The architecture section was forced to devote itself to fictional designs and research. The advisors studied theoretical models, program blueprints and standardization measures, organigrams for the management of large and smaller boroughs were developed, as were studies of the relationship between surface, circulation, and the location of buildings, model types, and standardized typologies for farmhouses, schools, town halls, sports grounds, cemeteries, and so on. After the war, many of the CGRP employees disappeared into the background of society or went to try their luck in the colonies with the Conseil supérieur des cités indigènes and later with the Office des cités africaines. And I will end up my talk there. Thank you very much.